So thank you all so much for joining us for WIAA's October GBM and our amazing faculty panel. I'm so excited to get started. Before we get into the panel and asking our amazing faculty a few questions, I do want to update you all on WIAA's upcoming events. So next week, we'll be holding a diversity, equity, and inclusion dialogue on Monday at 4 p.m. We'll be hosting some representatives from the Counseling Center as well as the LGBTQ Equity Center to provide resources for students. And then we'll have a discussion afterwards to kind of talk about how everyone's feeling and how we can support one another within the department. And you can RSVP for that at ter.ps/WIADEI. And another fantastic event next week is our flight controller workshop. We're so excited about this, and it's hosted by our technical development chair, Nick Ream. It will be next Wednesday at 5 p.m. and it should be about an hour and a half long. It'll be an intro to flight controller functionality and hardware, PID control, and numerical simulation with Euler integration methods. So if you're interested, make sure that you have MATLAB downloaded. And even if you're a freshman, we'd love for you to join us. It'll introduce you to MATLAB, which you'll be using throughout your aerospace career. So feel free to register at tr.ps/flightc. And finally, before we get started, we are so excited to announce our virtual networking night. This will be replacing our typical WIAA night, and it's going to be hosted on the web-based platform called Gatherly. We already have reservations from representatives from Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, NASA Goddard, Aurora Flight Sciences, as well as a bunch of other aerospace companies. We have limited spots though, so if you're interested in joining us, please RSVP very soon at trps/WIANet20. And now I will turn it over to our Community Development Chair, Shika Redhall, and she will introduce our fantastic panelists.
Hey, Rachel, thank you so much. Just a quick update before we start. Dr. Flatau is trying to join in. Can you please check on what is the issue there? So she's not able to join. But in the meanwhile, thank you everyone again to come in, and thanks to our wonderful faculty to be here tonight. We are waiting for Dr. Flatau to come in, but we have Dr. Hartzell. She's the assistant professor in the Aerospace Engineering Department. We have Dr. Otte, who's also an assistant professor in our department, and Dr. Paley is a professor, and Dr. Sedwick is also a professor in our department. I guess everyone knows all the professors here, at least most of them. So not waiting further, we'll start with our first question. It's like an introduction question to all the professors is, what are your research interests and what's an interesting project you are currently working on? So anyone can take the lead.
I'll dive in. Allison Flatau here. And my research interests have varied from things down at the nanoscale up to huge things like engines on planes. And my background was actually in the acoustic combustion instabilities in solid rocket motors. But I've gotten into studying materials that are used for design of sensors and actuators and energy harvesting. And those are where I've gotten down to the nanoscale. We actually look at nanowires of magnetostrictive materials for making sensors. So currently I've got a graduate student who is modeling acoustic combustion instabilities in solid rocket motor, in gas turbine engines for the Army. So very varied. Hope that helps.
I can jump in. So I've been watching a lot of political debates, so I'm going to respond by not answering the question. Because I just want to thank you for organizing this and thank you for inviting me. Also, sorry about the background noise. If it gets too loud, you might have to come back to me. But I just wanted to say it's a real honor to be on this panel. Okay, I'm going to shut the door. Hold on. Sorry about that. I have to do that more often than I would like during class, actually. So I just want to say it's an honor to be on this panel. It's a really amazing group of faculty. Professor Flatau actually is one of my own mentors. So pretty much everything I know, I learned from from her. So I just want to state that up front. Dr. Sedwick, I have the privilege of having my office next to his, and I get to listen to his advising appointments. And I think he's probably the #1 advisor in the department. Just listening to him talk like relaxes me. So I can only imagine what it does for students. Dr. Hartzell, I mean, she has an asteroid named after her. How cool is that? I mean, you can't beat that. That wins. And she has a cat. And Dr. Otte, well, I hired Dr. Otte, so he must be pretty good. So let's just leave it at that. So anyway, thank you for being including me in this. Some of you, I guess all of you probably are either taking my class or have taken my class. So I teach dynamics and controls. I do research in that topical area. I do a lot of what we call multi-agent systems. So groups of robots or groups of biological systems. Lots of wide-ranging interests. In fact, I'm just working on a talk that I'm going to give next week. If you're interested, Thursday at 4 p.m., I'll be giving a talk that kind of covers, I would say, my whole career. So I've been whittling down the slides. I'm down to like 60 slides, trying to get it down to like a manageable amount. But yeah, I got interested in autonomous vehicles right out of college and learned about, these unmanned submarines that could swim around and talk to each other and do things, without a pilot. And I just thought, wow, that was the coolest thing ever. I mean, so I kind of knew, I didn't know what I wanted to do while I was in undergrad, but after undergrad, working for a year or two, I kind of stumbled into this area and been working on it ever since. Of course, in an aerospace department, we luckily at Maryland, we have the neutral buoyancy facility. So, doing underwater stuff is still possible, but kind of branched out into air, the air domain, doing quad rotors and stuff too. But at the level of mathematical abstraction that we work with in dynamics and control, a lot of the tools that we develop for multi-agent systems apply in either domain. So yeah, I think I'll just stop there. So thank you again for including me.
I'll jump in next, because the first thing I want to do is actually put in a plug for Dr. Hartzell, because she probably won't plug herself. But this past spring, Dr. Hartzell actually transitioned from being an assistant professor to being an associate professor in the department. And so if you'd join me and, like Lamont likes to do with the reaction emojis and the clapped hands, it's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, sort of milestone in the career of a faculty member. And she's certainly very well deserving of it, and we're very happy to have her. And as Dr. Paley said, well, actually, so we got hired at the same time, he and I. So we have been at the university in side-by-side offices for 13 years now, I think. So seems like forever. So my area is space, power, and propulsion systems. So I work on what would be considered advanced systems, and they're not advanced because they're any better than other systems. They're advanced because they are less developed than most other systems. And so I like to focus on what at NASA would be referred to as low technology readiness level technologies. So once the technology becomes too advanced, then I sort of lose interest in it and I move on to the next thing. So my PhD was actually in nuclear propulsion, doing a gas core fission system. So that was a combination of power and propulsion. My career, I've gone through a lot of different things, including a little foray into flight dynamics. So when I came to Maryland, I sort of went back to my roots and started in the power and propulsion area again. And right now, I've sort of narrowed scope quite a bit. There's only really a couple of projects that I'm focusing on. As opposed to the past, where I had a dozen students working on almost as many different projects, which is sort of unmanageable from an advising standpoint. So I will hand it off at that point.
All right, I will pick it up. I study granular materials that are driven by non-gravitational forces, specifically for space applications. So I'm interested in dust on asteroids, dust on the moon. My mom would tell me that like dust doesn't move. It's really not very exciting. You have to do something to get the dust to move. But in bodies where the gravity is weak, forces that are not important on Earth start to become really important. So like cohesion and electrostatics and all these sort of exotic forces are things that I like to study. So I study these both in order to understand the evolution of small bodies like the moon and asteroids, but also to help design spacecraft to explore them. So I'm involved with OSIRIS-REx, which is at the asteroid Bennu, which is behind me. And I'm involved with that mission, and I'm involved with another mission that is planning to fly by 2 binary asteroid systems, which are asteroids that have moons. So we have 2 spacecraft flying by 2 binary asteroid systems. So in other words, 4 asteroids. There's a lot of 2s in this mission. And then I also do things closer to Earth. So I have some projects looking at orbital debris. So trying to understand how we might be able to detect very small orbital debris. So again, getting back to the dust theme, we don't want to stray too far from the dust. So very small orbital debris that is currently undetectable, but still a hazard to spacecraft. Looking at new ways to detect those small debris objects. As far as dust bunnies on the moon, they move around, but I don't think I guess they can clump together too, but probably the ones that are clumped together don't really move around. So, eating cheese, I mean, no, there is no cheese. At least I haven't seen any evidence of cheese, although there's a lot of talk about water on the moon. So I guess that's a key ingredient to cheese probably.
I guess that leaves me. I am the youngest person here in the aerospace department, and Professor Paley and Professor Flatau are both of my advisors, and I have Professor Aiken is also my advisor. But for young faculty, they put together they don't want to be called older faculty probably, but the older faculty advise me, and I advise some students, and so I very much, enjoy that interaction and learning from the people older than me. If in case any of the students here, I requested from Professor Worley to have these people on my advisory committee because they tell me the things that I need to hear even when I don't want to hear them. And I try to remind them of that because I need people that are willing to fight with me when I push back. So, and I know that all of them are, and I'm sure that everybody on the panel would too. I don't want to say that you wouldn't, but I just had personal experience in which case the other people didn't cut me any slack. And so I said, okay, that's important. I need more of that in my life. I loosely speaking, I guess, do motion planning and kind of autonomous systems and multi-agent systems. My PhD thesis was kind of at the intersection of that. And then since that time, I've been kind of doing the whole thing, like not necessarily the intersection, but the kind of the set union of all that stuff. So what does this mean for like current projects, I guess? We have some quad rotors that we fly around, and we're very interested in designing better motion planning algorithms that account for kind of what's happening on the quad rotor. So in particular, we're about ready to submit a paper, actually 2 papers tomorrow is the deadline. And this is kind of our ongoing up and coming work, but we are looking at kind of how to control the quad rotor when the motors start to fail. And then instead of just, stabilizing it at a certain point, we want it to be able to fly home with only 1 or 2 rotors. And this is an interesting problem because you can't just have the quadrotor sitting there, if it's lost a motor, the only way to kind of maintain position is actually to rotate and spin about an axis constantly. So people have demonstrated this before from a control point of view, but we are interested in then taking it a step further from my point of view for motion planning, which is saying, okay, we have a controller that's able to stabilize about a point. Let's then see if we can get it from where it's currently kind of barely hanging together and go land or something safe. And I think that this is important for the use of quadrotors moving into the future. If we have quadrotors operating around civilians in some sort of a, package delivery has been kind of bandied about it as one potential application. We want to make sure that if they get, broken, they aren't going to go and hurt somebody. So that kind of is one of my research thrusts. Another research thrust that we have been looking at more from a multi-agent point of view. I have in the lab, I have a swarm of 200 little kilowatt robots that we do a lot of kind of interesting swarm-based algorithms. And one of my previous kind of mentors is Radhika Nagpal, and she and her postdoc created these kilowatt platforms. And I owe a lot of my own kind of outlook on life to the fact that she kind of took me under her wing in her lab at a point in my life when I really needed a good kind of reset a little bit from a philosophical point of view. And she introduced me to kind of some very cool swarm ideas, and we've done a lot of stuff there. So a recent paper that was just accepted from my lab on this stuff is we have an inert boat that kind of communicates out of its stern and hull, and it's in a sea of the little tiny kilowatts. So the little kilowatts are like, they're teeny, but the little kilowatts act as a smart fluid. They're each a particle in a smart fluid, and the boat, by communicating with the robots around it, gets the fluid to do things and push the boat. So the boat navigates by telling the fluid, hey, rotate me or push me forward, and we're able to drive the boat around. So those are kind of two little insights into the stuff that we're kind of interested in my lab.
Yeah, thank you so much. I guess all of you guys are doing some interesting work, and like it shows that how much varied aerospace engineering can be, from studying dust to UAVs to gas turbine engines and space propulsion. It's very exciting. Just a quick thing that if anyone have any questions, please put them in chat or raise your hands. Moving on to the next question is, everyone would like to know what motivated you guys to pursue a career in aerospace engineering. And again, I guess we can start with Dr. Flatau.
Sorry, I just switched from I've been doing a touch screen, and so I'm touching, and I'm on my laptop, not a touch screen. So mostly because it's cool and it's fun and it's fascinating. And my undergrad degree, when I got out of high school and was looking for engineering as being something that I thought I'd enjoy professionally, I started wanting to be an environmental engineer and save the environment. And I got into that somehow led into chemical engineering, and that's actually what my undergrad degree is. But my first job was developing processes for the treatment of nuclear waste. This was when Jimmy Carter was president, and there was an energy crisis. And literally day one of my job at the Rocky Flats Golden facility, they walked me into the into the trailer where you wait for your government clearance, introduced me to the other 6 people they had hired that summer, and said, everybody come on over, meet Allison. And also, if you find any other jobs you want to do on plant site, please take them. Jimmy Carter just cut our budget. And with that, 4 of the 6 of us transferred to the wind energy, small wind systems test center. It was something with Jimmy Carter. It was just coming into vogue that this is why I have gray hair, because this was back in the 70s, we'll say 70s. I started testing wind turbines for generating electricity. I was a test engineer, I actually had a little bit of background because when I was an undergrad, I'd done solar hot water heating system testing. And so alternative energy there, alternative energy, there it made sense as a chemie, you would do thermal processes and fluid transport. So that made sense. Turned out I just loved my job with wind turbines for generating electricity. I was out in one of those cherry picker trucks going up and down and putting instrumentation on blades. I love being a test engineer. And when I went back to grad school, it was to study acoustics and vibrations. Rotating blades have just fascinating vibration issues. Every 6 weeks, I was on Wind Watch, where how doctors are always on call. Every 6 weeks, the test engineers were on call. And in Golden, Colorado, they have the Chinook winds that come down off the Rockies. And in fall season, we were always driving out to the wind site at night for the Chinook winds to blow down windmills and keep track of what was breaking. And it was just fun. And then grad school, I got to study the space shuttle solid rocket boosters that have fascinating acoustic problems. They're basically 120-foot long, 12-foot diameter organ pipes. You can see, I just think it's fun. So that's why I'm here. On to who's next? Derek or Ray?
Well, what I would say is, first of all, I'm just really impressed by all of you guys, all the students in aerospace engineering, especially everybody here tonight. I love working with the students. I love working with you guys. I really miss the in-person class 301. You guys might not miss it, but I do. And because you guys really impress me, how focused you are, how like on the ball you are. I wasn't like that. I mean, I was academically focused, but I had no idea what I really wanted to do. I really liked physics in high school. I had an amazing high school physics teacher. And I think this is what I try to tell my kids. Don't lock yourself into a particular, self, discipline or self-discipline is good, but don't lock yourself into a particular, like, oh, I'm good at math, or I like, biology, or I hate, science. So much of it depends on your instructor, especially at a young age. Like we all, like, you never know from one year to the next, like what you're going to like, what you're not going to like. So don't like steer yourself too soon, I think. But I happen to have a really amazing high school physics teacher. And so when I got to college, for some reason, I had it in my head I was going to be pre-med, but I didn't want to take any pre-med classes. And it took me like a surprisingly long amount of time to realize that maybe pre-med wasn't a good thing for me, since all I wanted to do was take physics. So I was like, well, I'll just take physics first, and then I'll come back and I'll take all the other stuff later. So I was taking physics, and then, this is the other thing. I always encourage, 301 students, like work with other people, talk to other people. Like I would have been lost if I didn't have like my cohort of other students that I would work with. And, because I was kind of oblivious, I guess, to what was going on around me. And I remember one of my friends said, junior year, the physics major has this like really awful lab, like an old-fashioned lab. I get to go to lab and do the lab stuff, and it was supposed to be like really hard, really bad. But then there was this other major called applied physics, which was really small and I'd never even heard of, that didn't have the lab, but it was still physics. And I was like, well, that's a no-brainer. So I'm just gonna go into applied physics so I don't have to do the lab. And instead, what you had to do is you had to do like 2 semesters or 3 semesters, something like that, of independent research, kind of like our 398H, I think, or 499 for that matter. So I got situated doing research in a laboratory as an undergraduate, and I loved it. I mean, that's when I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like I really, and that's why I really encourage you guys to have that kind of experience as undergrads, to get engaged with research. There's so many good things that can come of it, even if it's not necessarily what you're going to do. Like I was actually doing research at the medical school on MRI. Like, I don't know anything about MRI, but I was down there working on MRI and the physics of medical imaging and stuff. And it was really fun. Learned MATLAB. That was great. So then I remember graduating and kind of having a sense that I wanted to go to grad school, but again, didn't really know what in. but based on my undergrad experience, I knew I really liked research. So I ended up working for 5 years in between undergrad and grad. And that was a really important formative experience for me. As I mentioned, it's kind of how I found my passion, autonomous vehicles. It gave me a lot of focus when I, got to grad school. I kind of knew what I wanted to do. So when I hire grad students, honestly, I really value students who have that kind of real world experience, because the flip side, now some people, I have a good friend of mine who was actually one of my professors in grad school. He went right from undergrad to grad, right to faculty. Some people are just on that track. That wasn't me. I had to work to figure out what I wanted to do. And, I have seen on more than one occasion students that go right from undergrad to grad. There's nothing wrong with it, but a risk is that you, at the end of your graduate, program of study, whether it's a master's, PhD, like you kind of feel like you haven't been out in the real world. Like I've seen it happen. Students are like, they're just like done. Trust me, I've been in the real world. Being in academia is way better, but you don't know that until you try it, until you're out there. And so I had 5 years of professional experience, 5 years of grad school, and I was like, yeah, I think being a professor is the way to go. So, but the question was about aerospace. My graduate degree was actually jointly in mechanical and aerospace engineering, and it took me like 5 years to figure out that I was actually a mechanical engineer. So I always thought mechanical engineering was like people who did like CAD stuff and like build stuff, and I did controls and dynamics. And so it took me a really long time to figure out that, yeah, I was a mechanical engineer because that's controls too. And then I got a job in an aerospace department, and I was like, whoa, that's okay. But the great thing about aerospace engineering is it has dynamics and controls. And so now I'm an aerospace engineer. So that's how it happened for me.
I guess I can go next. So for me, it was science fiction. So when I was little, I just really enjoyed sci-fi. I loved, space, and I didn't even really know what an engineer was until embarrassingly late in life. I think it was just prior to going off to college, really, to applying to undergraduate programs. But when I found out that, wow, so I really love space, there's sort of two paths I could see going. So I could either go into physics, so astronomy or astrophysics, or aerospace engineering. And so, did I want to focus on sort of the science, or did I want to focus on developing the technology to advance space exploration? And so, I decided to go the technology route. And then only very many years later did I realize that, unfortunately, the fundamental physics that's required to do the type of exploration that I was really motivated by isn't even really there yet. And so now in the last, 5 years or so, I've sort of been doing these secret level 17 side projects that really haven't amounted to anything yet. But anyhow, so yeah, it was basically science fiction that got me into aerospace engineering.
All right, so I apparently have been interested in dust for a long time because I had an amazing 4th grade teacher that did a unit on space, and we all had to do a project at the end of that unit, and I invented a snake that ate regolith on the moon. So regolith is basically moon dust. So I've been into dust for a long time. And then
Did you know the word regolith in 4th grade?
Yes, I did.
I only learned that word like a year ago.
Yeah, because the snake's name was a slith. Snake plus regolith, slith. All right, everyone got that? Yes. Key term from today, the slith, invented by Dr. Hartzell. Yes. So I was interested in dust, and then I toyed with being a vet because I really like animals, or going into medicine. And then towards the end of middle school, I had to write a really long report. And so I had to choose a topic that I was going to remain interested in for a longer period of time. And I decided to go back to this space topic. I was really into space, and I decided, well, I'll combine my interest in space with my interest in medicine, and I'll write a report on bioastronautics, which is like the study of how the human body is affected by, microgravity. So after doing that, I was pretty settled on doing something space related for undergrad. And I, like Dr. Sedwick, it was like, well, should I do a physics astronomy thing? But I was a little bit worried about being employed after I graduated. so I decided, well, I'll do aerospace engineering because I for sure can get a job after I graduate with that degree. So that's how I went down the aerospace engineering route.
I guess I think that leads me bringing up the rear again, which, so I guess I kind of got in a variety of different ways thinking back on it. And I just remembered something as I was listening to everybody else talk. So when I was a kid, when I was like in 3rd grade, people said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, aeronautical engineer. And like, that was just the standard answer for like 10 years. And I also kind of liked computers. And when I had to think about what I had to do when I went to college, I thought about it deeply for like months. Like, what am I going to do when I grow up? And there's something that's really important. And somehow somebody had exposed me to it when I was that age, which is that there should be an element of something that you like in whatever you do going forward. Now, of course, if you need to put a roof over your head and eat, like that's more important than, doing a job that, whatever, you should do a job you don't like just to be able to survive, right? Like, that's obvious. But if you can survive, then hopefully, what we would wish for anybody is that there's an element of something that they really love in what they do. And when I was thinking about what I want to do in college, I realized that both with, back in that day, like, aerospace was a thing, but for me, the air track kind of is maybe what I would have thought of myself as back then. But now that's more diverse. We'll get to that. But the thing that I really loved about it was I would always be making paper airplanes. I made paper airplanes like at least one a day for like, most of my childhood. And I would go and fly them. And every time I would, go someplace where I could like throw it out the window, I try and do that. And I just loved making paper airplanes. And I also enjoyed like playing computer games and stuff. And keep in mind, this was a number of years ago, even though I'm, youngest professor here, like still a number of years ago, computers weren't like super widespread when I was thinking about going to college in the way that they are now. Like it wasn't like every single person had like 3 of them in their house. But I knew that I kind of liked the computer thing too, and I couldn't decide. So I decided to double major. I did a dual degree in aeronautical engineer, where I went to school, that's what they called it, and computer science. And along the way, I think the computer stuff I actually absorbed more quickly, which is just, I loved the aerospace stuff too. And I still think flight is amazing. Obviously, I'm here now. But when I went to grad school, I thought that I should focus on the thing that I could kind of breathe in and pick up more than the other thing. Because if you're going to spend 6 years doing something, you should, have it be something that you can absorb quickly. So even though I liked both of them a lot and would recommend anybody to do either one of them, I focused on what I thought was computer science. But my advisors are always electrical engineers. And when I did a postdoc, it turns out that my advisor was an aerospace engineer. And so I always had like one foot in the air stuff and more engineering-y side, even though I didn't know it. I always kind of thought that I identified with computer science people until I went to a conference, and I was like, I don't fit in here either. And it was just, I was always kind of in between everything. And so I guess everybody is more than one thing. So, I consider myself to be a computer scientist. I consider myself to be an aerospace engineer. I consider myself to be a roboticist. And all of this stuff when you get high enough or out in industry or in academia, wherever, it all gets mushed together when you get up high enough, and it isn't siloed the way that it is when you have to pick what you want to do when you grow up when you're 18. So I was fortunate enough to kind of still have a foot in either one all the way up, and that has just kind of kept going forward. So what does that mean? Like these days, when I was applying for the job here, you have to give a job talk and convince everybody that they should hire you. And I realized that the autonomous robotics stuff that I had kind of done up until this point had applications both in the air track and the space track. And I realized that I had worked on projects that were really related to air and space like my entire career. So making that talk was actually really easy. And I was like, how come I never really saw this before now? But that, yeah, it's kind of a long and winding journey, I guess. But at the core of it, at the very beginning, right, there's like a kernel of something that you really love that's at the heart of that, so that even, on the days when it's bad, you're working very hard, there's that element that, like, okay, I love this deep down, and so, like, it's not all that bad. And most of the days are super awesome.
Thank you so much. So I guess the next question is more of a personal take on what you guys like. So outside of research and teaching, what are your hobbies? What you like to do? Anyone? Dr. Paley.
Well, let's see. So I have 2 kids, so that's kind of a big chunk of my like non-work time. As I mentioned earlier, and you might be able to hear, we have 2 parrots and a dog, kind of a 2-year-old puppy dog. I also like folding paper airplanes, although I might be a little rusty. So these days, I've been fortunate because I do a lot of rock climbing. My climbing gym reopened over the summer, so I've been going back to there each week now again, which is nice. I used to play softball, but softball has not restarted due to COVID, so that's kind of a sad thing. So I have a lot of friends that I play softball with. Been for the last year or so, been trying to teach myself how to play guitar. So, and I've been doing a lot of reading actually. Joined a book club, been listening to Audible when walking the dog, that kind of stuff. So I kind of back into reading again, which is really nice.
All right, I'll go next to mix it up. So my hobbies are riding horses, and I just bought a new horse property, which I'm moving into at the end of the month. So I will have a 4-stall barn, and I will have 8 acres, and I will have horses at home, which I'm very excited about. And my other hobby is downhill skiing, which Maryland is not a great place to do, but I see that a lot of people on this panel have Colorado ties. I went to grad school in Colorado. And so usually in non-COVID times, my husband and I fly out west to go skiing a couple times a year. So those are the primary hobbies. Before we bought the house, during this COVID period, I started playing the piano again, which I did as a kid, and so that was kind of cool to like see that I really do remember how to like read music and play music and stuff. But since we bought the house, all extra time has been going into the house.
I guess if we're switching order, I'll go next. Sorry if I think I just cut off Professor Flater. Professor Flater, do you want to go next?
Sure. We'll disrupt it because you're a skier too, so you can come after me. I'm a skier too. I was when I was an undergrad, I was on the ski team at UConn. Go Huskies! Not a lot of skiing in Maryland, but that's actually part of the lure. That's what drew me to Colorado. I was a ski bum after my undergrad degree for the whole winter. which is what kept me in Colorado. And then grad school, who knew, but the skiing in Utah is even better than in Colorado. So I have done lots and lots of skiing. I can confirm the skiing in Vermont is not as good, even though I grew up doing that, and I still go up to Vermont because it's closer than Colorado and Utah. And I've off and on done a lot of bike riding and golfing, and actually right now I'm visiting family and met my great nephew, my first great nephew. So I'm totally over the top excited about that, and do a lot of golfing. Golfing is what I've taken up for a hobby. Oh, and Audible reading, listening to Audible while you're walking the dog. That's a great pastime. So I think that covers most of it. Okay, now another skier. Let me hand it off to another skier.
Oh man, another skier. I guess, yeah, I like to ski for sure. I competed cross country skiing when I was in college. I was also on the ski team. I was at a little tiny school in upstate New York called Clarkson University for my undergrad. And in these days, I run a lot, actually. I was also in the cross country running team. So I try to get out, at least 5 days a week to go on a run. I think that doing something physical really keeps me focused and sane. So it's just also kind of a nice personal time. And that is definitely something that you can do. I found a neat little neck gaiter thing that actually cools off when you breathe through it using evaporative kind of cooling, the way a swamp cooler works, instead of like keeping it all in there. Although now that it's wintertime, I should get a normal neck gaiter. But to kind of run around, I've changed my running routes during the pandemic to be kind of places that other people aren't so much. The one time that I run on a path with a lot of folks, like everybody is wearing the mask and everything, but that's when I take the dog running once a week to keep the dog in a good mental state as well. Other fun hobbies and stuff. Actually, art was always a pretty big part of my life. So I oil paint. I do plain out oil painting. Try to get out at least for like that's something that I do with my father. So we go on a trip usually once a year and do plain out oil painting. Then when I was in grad school, not so much these days, but when I was in grad school for a good long time, I did a lot of dancing. So I really like tango dancing. That was something that I did for many years. Not quite so much anymore these days, although I would love to. Again, I find that I tend to pick up hobbies that are proximal to where I'm located. And if I have to drive more than 25 minutes, it's kind of hard. So the running is excellent, and I can do that from any place. And of course, you can kind of like, paint from wherever if you want to, or whatever. As far as reading, I do try to read for fun, although, that's a lot of balls to juggle. So I think for whatever reason, fall is almost reading season sometimes. Maybe it's because the days are getting shorter and you have to figure out stuff to do more inside. But yeah, that's kind of my stuff.
Nobody should have to go last on this question. So as I think about hobbies, I come to the realization that a lot of my hobbies are things that I used to do, and I don't so much do them anymore, which is maybe a problem. So as sort of the oddball among all these skiers, so I'm a knuckle dragger. I started snowboarding when I was in graduate school with my office mate. So we had, I think he had actually skied a little bit before, but I had never gone. So I tried skiing one time, and by the end, I threw out my poles because it was too much for me to keep track of at one time. So I decided, well, I just might as well take up snowboarding then. So for many years, I'd go probably get out maybe 8 or 10 times a year, which was a lot for me. And then it sort of got down to maybe 5 times, and now it's been probably 2 years, I think, since the last time I went out. So I'd like to get back to that at some point. I also in grad school played softball, so I played both slow pitch and I was on a fast pitch team. I played a little bit whenever I got to Maryland for a couple of summers, but I also haven't done that for a while. I also ran when I was in graduate school, and that's certainly something I have not done in a long time. As well as go to the gym at Maryland, something I have not done in probably 2 years now. So the only thing I think I still do is read, but I don't really read. I mean, it's enjoyment for me, but you know, I like reading technical papers that are outside of my sort of like primary research area. So there's still, it sort of goes in the direction of sort of like the advanced physics related stuff. It's not stuff that I sort of actively research, but stuff that's very much of interest to me. So I enjoy reading things like that, which my wife thinks is a little odd, which I don't blame her. Other than that, home renovation, which doesn't sound like much of a hobby, but you know, we do a fair amount of it. So I've been into that since I was a kid. Actually, I did construction with my father and my grandfather. So you know, I like to do those things around the house. Although as I get older, I also see the advantages to paying other people to come do it. You know, I feel like I'm giving back to the economy, right? So you know, paying other people to come and do that hard labor. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you so much. That's quite a learning to know what our professors like to do in the free time. So the next question is quite interesting. It's what advice do you have for students to make the most out of their aerospace courses? So anyone?
I will go. So I think you should sit in the front row. People don't like to, but it really changed my experience as an undergrad when someone said, like, you are paying for the privilege of listening to these professors talk. And that really like changed my mindset about classes. And so I would encourage people to think about that you're paying to hear us talk. So you should show up and like be there in the front row.
And for me, I just think about the people on the call here. I mean, Anisha and Tanushri and Rachel, I just remember you guys in 301, like you came to all the lectures, came to office hours whenever you could, you know, you worked together, but you also were able to do stuff independently. I mean, I think you guys have it figured out. You should be answering this question, not me. I haven't been an undergrad in forever. So I think this, I'd like to hear some of you guys answer this question, honestly.
That's so nice of you, Dr. Paley. The fact that you remember that makes me so happy. Yeah, I guess for the younger students on the call, definitely show up to office hours and ask all the questions, even if they're silly, because the professors will answer them.
There are no stupid questions in office hours.
And actually, I'm one of those. I will never grade a student down based on one-on-one interactions, but a lot of times I actually will grade a student up based on one-on-one interactions, because it's giving grades is one of the most ridiculously hard parts of doing this job, because we have to assign A's, B's, C's based on our perception of your understanding of course material. And our standard tool for that, for better or worse, is an exam. It's a quiz. And even when you get to grad school, all of a sudden it changes a little because grad classes are smaller, so you get to interact with the students a little bit more than in a undergrad class, and you actually get to understand more of what they understand just because of those interactions. And when you come to office hours, maybe it helps me understand more of what you do understand than what you show on an exam. And so like I say, I would never grade anybody down based on that interaction. the starting point is whatever grade your exam scores tell me you have earned in the class. But I don't know about the other faculty, but I will round a grade up if I believe the student's comprehension level corresponds to a higher grade. So that just comes through talking. It's not quite getting right back on the point of the question, which is I'm going to jump off of that track for a little bit. And I had when I was an assistant prof, I had an opportunity to go to Boeing for a summer. I was a Boeing Welliver faculty fellow. And one of our jobs as faculty was to learn what people in industry took to industry from their undergrad degrees. And they intentionally set us up with people that were sort of assistant prof level, associate prof level, and full prof level, meaning people that had been working for 5, maybe 8 years, people that had been working 8 to 10 years, 8 to 15 years maybe, and then people that had been with the company forever. They'd been there for 20 years, 30 years. And it was fascinating because all the young ones were like, oh man, my grad course in this, my undergrad senior capstone design, they would tell you what course it was and why it was important, and they could connect those dots. And the mid-range people were more appreciative of that, the breadth of the courses I had, but still focused on the technical courses. And the senior ones were saying, maybe my English courses, maybe my activities, the groups where I got to develop both, articulation skills. And so that just says take everything you can absorb from your undergrad experience, that there's going to be value, and at different times you'll find that they've made you a better engineer going forward. So.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on that one because I think it's worth underscoring the importance of like our non-technical classes. I think in engineering sometimes there's sort of this feeling like, oh, grumble, I have to take technical writing, or grumble, I have to take core classes or whatever. But and I think sometimes as faculty we don't do a good job of like pushing back against that, because yeah, and aerospace is the coolest, right? I mean, of course the other classes are not going to be as good, but I don't know, as we've seen, like I think in society, like a liberal arts education is so important because we produce citizens. I mean, you're learning to become a good citizen in college. Like that's what's happening, in case you weren't aware of it. Like you are becoming a good citizen. And that means learning a whole spectrum of, things outside, even beyond your major. But specifically for engineering, I just want to echo what Dr. Flatau said, because communication skills, whether it's oral communication or written communication, it's so important. And I spent most of grad school wishing I had paid more attention in my undergrad math classes. But then my first 5 years on the faculty here, I was regretting not taking more writing classes. So being able to write, I mean, you might have an amazing research idea, but if you can't communicate it, it's not going to have the impact. Whereas the mediocre to good ideas, if they're packaged well, those are the ones that are going to be visible. So if you can kind of put it all together, that's what I would recommend. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in on that, but I just want to say that. Thank you.
Is the floor open? I would say this is advice that I give to my grad students when I first have them in the lab for the first time. I think that it's advice that's good for also undergrads though, which is that make sure that, if there's something else that you also like in your life, that you do that and have something else that you're passionate about. If there is something else that you're passionate about, some people can do one thing for their hobby and for their work and at home, and they dream about it. And those people are wired that way. And I think that's wonderful and that's great. But I think that most people, maybe are interested in more than one thing, and you're focused very narrowly on, if you're a grad student, and this is what I tell grad students, you're going to be doing this academic grad school thing, and you're going to be focused on it really hard. But you need, and I can't take credit for this idea, I stole it from somebody else, but you need a place that you can go when that isn't working well. You need another part of your life that you can go find refuge in, that you really like, that's just for fun and is just awesome. And that will help get you through the times when, what you're putting most of your energy into, you're going to have setbacks. I mean, everybody's human. Everything, it could be 8 steps forward, 3 steps back, but eventually you're going to keep moving forward. But it's nice to have another place to go when things aren't all 100% great. And I think that thinking about something that is different than aerospace, this is a little bit kind of echoing what Professor Paley said and what Professor Flatau said, but in a slightly different twist on it. So I think that by getting involved in something that you just like, it teaches you how to think in a different way. And that will help you think about engineering problems in a different way too. So you get this extra benefit that you're not even trying to get, but you're going to get it anyway. And when I'm looking to, hire people or whatever, I'm always very impressed if they have this other crazy aspect of their life that they're very into, because I think that it might allow them to have insights that nobody up until now has been able to have. Now, if you are one of these people that does one thing and one thing only because that's amazing, then I hope that you have like a slice of it, an element of it that is not necessarily competitive or the same stakes as what you're pouring all of your academic energy into. So like, in my world, that could be something like, mentoring high school kids in a robotics club or something like that. Like that's always going to be a fun place that you can go to kind of recharge if you're like, let's say your robotics journal paper just got, rejected with major revisions or something. So I think having that kind of way to find more balance is really important. And I think undergrads, there's so many great, extracurricular programs, even through UMD. In the pandemic, it's probably a little harder to find, but I think that make the effort, it's definitely worth it to have something else.
Well, I think I can wrap it up by saying I don't really think I have anything to add beyond what's already been said. I think the topic's been pretty well covered.
So I guess the next question is kind of on the similar lines of what advice, like any advice you have for students that might be feeling out of place or suffering from imposter syndrome in aerospace, which I feel seems like a very, like the imposter syndrome seems like a very common things, and not just undergrads, I would say in grad students as well. So any advice would be appreciated.
And in faculty as well. It's I don't know why it occurs, but I know it does, and it's really frustrating. As far as advice, and I'm drawing on things I have been told when I've been saying, I don't know. The latest one was I was really stressing. I got this amazing award. And it's like, it was very stressful for me. And I got to the point where the person was saying, well, do you think that the people that wrote the recommendation letters made up things? I'm like, well, no. No, I think their experience with me was that maybe I was good at that. And it was that. So I maybe just think about that. People aren't making up stuff about you. If they're giving you props for something, you don't get offered a job like for our assistant profs and our associate profs. You don't get offered a tenure track position at a university unless people really believe you're going to be excellent here. And when you get your jobs, people don't give you a job because they think you're an imposter. There's actually a lot of thought that goes into choosing who to hire, whether it's for a grad student or for a full-time job. So trust that you're where you are on the basis of that you've got a track record that people are excited to see you be successful with. I wish I could say it goes away, and I don't think it does. I don't know.
I think it's a little telling that it's something that's so pervasive that it has a name, right?
Yeah.
And that's, it's, I mean, I think most people feel that way at one time or another. It's probably very few people that never experience that. I mean, I've literally experienced that my entire life. And, to some extent, I still do, right? When I sort of see, so one of the things that we do as faculty is we serve on the promotion committees to evaluate other faculty, right? And so when the assistant professors become associates, when the associates become full, we sit in these meetings, and these faculty come through, and each year they just keep getting better and doing more. And so I review these applications. I'm like, oh my God, I couldn't possibly compete with this person. I'm so glad that I got tenured, some number of years ago, because, I suck in comparison, right? So, I mean, I don't know. It may never go away. So you just have to become comfortable with it. I think that I think, like Dr. Flatau said, it's you're being recognized for your achievements, because they're really achievements, right? And you do deserve it. And it's unfortunate that you sort of have that nagging feeling that maybe you don't, but I guess just take solace in that you're not alone in feeling that way. Most everybody probably does.
So I have a few kind of disparate thoughts here. I don't know if I'll be very coherent, but thought number one. So my daughter is older now, but when she was in elementary school, I don't know, did anybody ever do Girls on the Run? Is that something you guys know about, Girls on the Run? It's like a elementary age thing. You run a 5K, whatever. So I was a Girls on the Run coach. So there was all this like material. And so one of the lessons that we worked on, the phrase kind of stuck with me. It's a really handy phrase. It's negative self-talk. So negative self-talk. So you have to learn to recognize negative self-talk, like recognize it, acknowledge it. Okay, thought number two, put a pin in that one. So thought number two, I was a younger sibling, okay? So my brother and I, we used to trade some punches here and there, and I would usually take the worst of it. But, between that and playing sports growing up, I don't know, I think you develop your personality traits and your strengths and your ability to kind of, there are times definitely when I'm intimidated or, but you have kind of the inner strength, because from your past that you can fail and still get back up. You can get knocked down, but you can still get back up because you've done it before. And so you just kind of have that like stubbornness to just keep going. So I think the main thing that I would say, thought number three, is that we have to be like, from a parent standpoint, I think like the best thing a parent can do for their kids is teach them how to fail. Because we fail all the time. We fail. I remember the first time my paper got rejected. I was like crushed for like a week. It was devastating. The first 2 years on the faculty here, I didn't get a single proposal funded until I actually wrote one with Dr. Flatau, and then I learned how to write proposals. We fail all the time. Things get rejected, and you have to learn how to take it constructively. How can I get better from that? Nobody ever made it through life without failing. So it's how you respond to that failure that defines you, not what your successes are. And so I'm not as familiar with the imposter syndrome. I actually heard it because one of my students, told me that he had it a few years ago. I had not heard that expression before, but I think it fits into a broader category of like anxiety and self-doubt. And I would say with regard to that, the number one thing, because we all have anxiety and self-doubt to a very, varying degrees, is you have to learn to kind of nurture yourself a little bit. Like we take so much abuse and failure from the outside world. Like, why are we also subjecting ourselves to it from ourselves? Like, that's not productive. And we can, we all are motivated, we can strive and we can try to be better, but you have to kind of learn to nurture yourself. You have to learn to kind of trust yourself. Like if you don't feel like working on your homework, like if I don't feel like working on whatever million things I have to do, I have to learn to trust myself and say, you know what? I'm just going to put it down. I'm going to come back to it later because I don't feel like working on it. Because there will be a time, maybe tomorrow morning, I'll be refreshed, a cup of coffee and be like, okay, now I'm going to tackle it. So you got to learn to trust yourself, because if you don't trust yourself and you kind of force yourself, and then you get in this very unproductive, counterproductive kind of mindset. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess following up on that is advice that I was given was don't compare the inside of yourself to the outside of someone else. So, inside, right, we can have this running monologue of all the stupid, idiotic things and decisions that you've made. And then you see everyone else is doing all these wonderful things, right? Because that's what they project to you, and they understand everything and they're getting all A's and they're winning all these awards and blah, blah, blah. But inside, they're also feeling similarly uncertain. And I know that this is true because I've seen it with my grad students. So I when I meet with them one-on-one, I get to hear about all their worries and stress and oh my God. And they tell me, but so-and-so is doing so well and they get all these job offers and I never get job offers and blah, blah, blah. But I know how many jobs the other person applied to, right? Which the grad student doesn't know about. So I am like the omniscient professor, right? I see everybody's stress and worry, and I can tell you that everyone has the same stress and worry, and it is entirely people show you their best side, right? And they're not going to show you their insecurities, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? You should project the best parts of yourself, but you should also know that like the stress and anxiety that you feel is the same as the stress and anxiety other people feel. They're just not, it's just not something that we talk about.
I guess I think Professor Hartzell's point is probably the one that I would choose to echo the most strongly of anything that I've ever heard. So I'm gonna touch on other things, but that's the take-home message, what she said. The other thing I think is that sometimes it helps to think about, okay, what does it mean to fail? Like what are the actual consequences of this not working out if I'm gonna like put myself out there and try something new? And odds are that the consequences are not nearly as bad as we try to make them out in our head. Like we think it'll be like super embarrassing or something, but like the actual like cost to ourselves is gonna be not that bad. And if you really want to kind of do the really cool stuff, and this is more from like a research point of view, but I think it applies to life in general. Like you have to be trying stuff that is hard enough that you're gonna fail sometimes, because if you're not failing some of the time, you're not trying cool and hard enough stuff, basically. So the key is to, like, as Paley said, Professor Paley, like learn from those, take the lessons that you learn from those failures and help them turn future things into successes. There's another thing though, which again, I said, somebody that made, probably, I don't know if she realizes kind of how much of an impact she had positively on my life, but Radhika Nagpal's a Harvard professor, but I kind of talked my way into her lab group meetings and I just kept going because it was really, really good stuff. But celebrate every chance you get, because I think another panelist made the point, like we have setbacks all the time in academia, maybe even more than in other fields. Everything's, you know, stacked against us somewhat. The odds of, you know, proposal acceptance, they are, you know, 1 in 3 at the very best. Odds of paper submission acceptance at many of the places we want to submit are less than 50%. So like you're gonna fail probably based on probability more than you succeed. So when you do succeed, celebrate the heck out of it and have fun with it and really make a big deal about it. And I think that another thing, like again, kind of that I was exposed to from Radica was like, keep a file of all of the really good stuff so that you can go look at it if you're really having like a particularly like acute episode of anxiety or of you know, imposter syndrome, and you know, save the emails that say all the really good stuff in one place so you can go and look at that if you want to. Another thing is like, and I kind of did this as a kid, you know, I definitely didn't know what the words were as a kid, but you know, imposter syndrome in a few different ways as a kid was, if you go look at my childhood room, it has stuff up all over the walls, me reminding myself of the stuff that I was able to do that was good. And I've kind of taken that, you know, with me here, and like kind of just to show you, right, I have all of my conference badges from all the conferences just sitting right on my desk that I've been to, so I can remember like, okay, I've done good work before. You know, here's a nice pile of representation of places that I've been so that I can like look at it and be like, okay, I can get through this next one probably. So keeping relics and trophies like that, I think, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. And different people have different comfort level like putting it out there, but you know, like the badge thing, like people come through my house that aren't in academia or whatever, they aren't going to be like, wow, that's super weird, you know, like, and for me it's just like, yeah, look at this, like you know, this will keep me going through the night this time to, you know, hit the deadline later. Anyway, those are my tidbits, I guess. Oh, the last one though, sorry, and this is building off of another thing that Professor Hartzell said, was mentoring people that are not as far along their career as you are can really help, because to them, like, you are gonna seem just amazing, right? Because you are amazing. It's just like, it will take looking at yourself through their eyes sometimes to kind of understand how far you've come to be where you are currently. So that's a good way to remind yourself, in addition to keeping like inanimate objects around.
Okay, so that was actually our last question. I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists. This was amazing. Personally, I loved hearing your advice, your stories, your hobbies. Yes, this was awesome. For those who don't know, here's WIA's contact information. Get connected with us. We have a new group me so you can hear about all of our amazing events. But yes, thank you all so much. This is awesome. I'll stick around, and some of the other board members will stick around for a few minutes if you'll have questions or anything. But yeah, thank you all for an amazing event. Enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Thanks, everybody. Oh, fun for us too.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for having us.
And I'm going to start planning a ski trip now. Once we can socially, I don't know if you can socially distance while skiing.
You can socially distance. We just got to sit far apart on the chairlift.